All right. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Speed Traveler Roadshow. This is Cars and Coffee. In the studio here today, we've got Kelly, Charlie, and myself. I'm Chris. And guys, I got to tell you, it's really good to be back in the studio with you again.
Yeah, what happened to you? Tell everyone about what happened.
I got put down hard. I'm going to call it the flu. You can call it COVID, call it what you like, but I got really sick for a few days. But quarantined for 2 weeks, and now I'm good to go. And the best news is I lost about 7 pounds, and it hasn't come back yet.
Nice. Yeah, it should be a great episode. Today's featured marque is Mercedes, and kind of near and dear to our heart because we had a Mercedes 500 SEC from the 80s.
From the 80s. That was an awesome car. And we also got to drive some Mercedes recently, some new models. Yeah. So there's a lot of really good news to come out of Mercedes camp.
Absolutely. If you haven't listened to the Speed Traveler Roadshow before, we talk all things cars. We talk car shows. We talk fun things to do with your car. We talk car news, and we talk a little F1. And regarding F1, we're going to talk about this in the final segment.
Well, let me ask you a quick question, Charlie. Where can we find the Speed Traveler Roadshow?
That is a good point. If you're listening locally, you can find us on KHTS AM 1220. And that is in the Newhall, California area. You can also catch us on hometownstation.com. And of course, you can catch all of our old episodes and the current episode on the Speed Traveler YouTube page. And that's the Speed Traveler channel. Right. On YouTube, we've got all the episodes. We had a great episode last week on Ferrari. We had a great one on the Corvette. So if those are one of the marques that you like, right, go back and check it out.
And also today's episode, we got a great video on the Mercedes 500 SEC from the mid-'80s that we had. There's a couple good videos on that car as well.
Yeah, that's right. You did a great video on the 500 SEC, and that was a crazy one-off car. It was called the Benny S, and it looked like it came straight out of Miami Vice. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember Miami Vice. I certainly am. Kelly, do you know anything about Miami Vice?
Maybe.
That's a no. But this car was straight out of Miami Vice. It was a car that was in the Greater Chicago Auto Show Mercedes booth in 1985.
Right?
Yeah.
It was actually an 83 model, but it was the marquee piece for that year's auto show in Chicago. So that's really cool.
Yeah, we found this car. It was in a storage unit in Florida. Yep. And pretty cool. It had wild fender flares and bright red interior and, all sorts of cool
these
things.
Massive tires. I can't get over those tires.
And
They're
wheels.
like 13-inch wide tires, like Trans Am style, crazy, Trans Am style tires. It was just an absolute beast in appearance of a vehicle.
Yeah, but if you want to see more, go to the YouTube channel, The Speed Traveler, and check out Chris's review of the Benny S 500 SEC. But a little later in the show, we are going to talk fun things to do with your Mercedes. Mercedes-Benz Club of America is a great thing. We're also going to talk about some great trips we've taken in the past. That's part of the fun of the Speed Traveler is we talk about and share all the fun trips we've taken. And then we're going to wrap it up with a little F1 talk, and Mercedes being the featured marque. It'll fall right in line with what we're going to talk about today. But first, Kelly, why don't you give us a little automotive news on Mercedes?
They have the electric EQS Fastback and the S-Class sedan are going to have the level 3 drive pilot.
Is that the automated driving system?
Yes, it is.
Oh, my God.
So they're going to be driving themselves up to 40 miles an hour.
And this is in, I saw it's been approved in California and Nevada, correct?
Yes, and it's actually this fall. All of these are coming out. So it's pretty crazy that it's all coming out now. It's so soon.
I want to ask you, Kelly, I have mixed feelings about this. I love the technology. I'm just an old driver, so I like to drive. Is this autonomous passengering, if you will, not even driving? Is this, is this something that intrigues the younger generation?
Well, I think it could be better in a way because I think we're all distracted drivers, especially with like so many phones and stuff and social media. Like we have a lot of phone use and a lot of accidents because of that. So many accidents. And I think this could actually help. I think this could be good for us. Honestly,
so you think it'll actually make things safer?
I think it will make things safer. And they have a little guarantee. They said they'd cover the accident if there's an accident in the level 3 autopilot.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty crazy. So
wait. Mercedes is actually going to cover the accident, if you get in an accident with the automated driving system in EQS.
They're that
And
confident about it.
Wow, that is a great word for it. That is sheer confidence right there, you know?
That could end up biting
Which is
them in the
great,
butt.
though.
Right.
No, I don't think it will. I think that confidence is good confidence, and I hope that it does help keep the roads safer, especially with a lot of people on their phones. Like everyone, not just teenagers. Like everyone is on their phone, you know?
That's actually a really good point. But yeah, it's crazy. Getting back to Mercedes covering the liability, I think there's a few asterisks on that. You have to use it as it's intended to be used, and it has to be used correctly. So I'm not exactly sure what that means.
That's a giant loophole.
But yeah, it's pretty crazy to think that there's going to be Mercedes, this fall. We all live in California, driving around the streets. Now, there's some limits also on the speed. I guess it's only up to 40 miles per hour. And
but
also,
that's city driving.
That's
I mean,
not
that's
bad.
for the most part.
and I
that's
think
just,
right now it's approved for highways. I don't think it's approved for street use.
Who's going to be driving 40 miles an hour on the highway, though?
I think it's meant for stop and go traffic.
Interesting.
Yeah. So once you get on the freeway, you can basically tune out and,
I guess that
send
makes
your-
sense, though. I mean,
It does.
those of us that live in the Los Angeles area, we get on the 5, we get on the 405, and it's usually a stop and go parking lot in those
That's
peak hours
exactly
anyways. So
right.
probably what
Yeah.
they're really focusing
Yes.
technology around.
Yeah, so I don't think Mercedes is confident enough in the cars driving around city streets and stoplights and stop signs and people quite yet.
Right. Little
But-
Susie can jump out between two parked cars at any time.
Yeah, but if you think about it, it is pretty smart because it's highway and freeway use. So that means, there's not going to be people walking around in theory on the freeway. So it
Right.
really makes a lot of sense for them because they reduce that liability of running over a family in a crosswalk.
Right. And we see reports of that on the news every day. Some
Yeah.
12-year-old boy gets hit by a car, by a
Yeah.
distracted driver.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that the little kid didn't do something a little bit incorrect, like I mentioned before, jumping out between two parked cars. But there's just so many incidences out on the road that anything we can do to do two things. One, make drivers much, much more aware of their surroundings and be better drivers. We talk about that a lot, Kelly. And also, I think this driverless systems will also assist that. I just hope it doesn't start pulling people away from actually learning how to use and drive a car.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, we're here talking the Speed Traveler Roadshow. We love cars. We love driving cars. We love driving manual cars.
Yeah.
And this is like a step in the opposite direction.
It's so counterintuitive to me. I mean, I'm with Kelly. I love the technology. I'm really excited about that. I just hope it doesn't really start just milking everyone away again from that
Yeah.
actual driving experience.
Yeah, that's
Because
a good
it's
point.
also there's a barrier there. There's a price point entry barrier. They're going to be more expensive vehicles. They're going to be
They
more
are.
to insure, and they're also going to be more to repair. I mean, all those electronics. In previous episodes, we've talked about cars that are a little bit more analog, if you will, as I like to put it. And we love those kind of cars because they're easy to work on and whatnot. But now you basically need an engineering and a mechanical engineering degree to even work on these cars.
Yeah. And to your point, Kelly, I think it's a step in the right direction. Maybe it's forever limited to freeway and highway use, so that you don't have the cars plowing through stop signs. And so that's not bad. Mercedes claims they've gone 100,000 miles so far without one incident.
Wow.
So that's
awesome.
impressive.
That's really impressive.
So you'll see this coming soon in California and Nevada this fall, correct?
Yep, this fall.
Yeah, it's a really nice car, the Mercedes EQS. It's we saw we actually got to drive the EQE platform, which is kind of
Right,
the
the
intro, the
AMG
AMG version.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I wasn't at first I was like, whatever, it's not a GT3, whatever. But then I got in it and I actually really liked it.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's 700 foot-pounds of torque, which is insane, and 617 horsepower, if my memory serves me
Yeah.
correctly. And I mean, what a beast! I mean,
And it was
that's
a
like
beast. And you can
Lamont's
still go to
car.
Costco and put, your $1,500 worth of toilet paper in the back and get it all home.
Yeah, and that's kind of the fun of electric cars. I mean, I definitely have my misgivings on electric cars, but I think that's part of the fun is you get 617 horsepower, 700 pounds of torque in basically a family car.
Right. But I really appreciate what Kelly said in that it's a fun car. It could be, it's going to be great for the safety moving forward, for everyone's safety. I think that's really important. And Kelly, you brought some really good points up about
Yeah, and that that it is a good point because if you're getting on the car in Southern California at 5 p.m., there's no driving experience there.
No.
So I mean,
No.
let the Mercedes what is it, Drive Pilot 3 system take you on the road, and
Right.
you can send your emails and texts.
Yeah, are you kidding me? I'm expecting tons of Instagram, selfies and stories coming from the driver's seat, playing with your dog, reading the newspaper. Well, no one reads a newspaper, but silly stuff like that. Actually, I bet you anything, I shouldn't even say this out loud, but I bet you anything there's going to be some crazy TikTok challenge that comes off of that.
Oh, goodness.
it's so
Hopefully
scary.
not.
But you are listening to the Speed Traveler Roadshow. We're going to take a little break, and we're going to come back, and we are going to talk about fun things you can do with your Mercedes. And then we're also going to talk about our buyer's guide for Mercedes that we like and future collectors. And that's, a big part of the Speed Traveler Roadshow is sharing that information with people. We've made a lot of mistakes in our buying and selling career,
but we also have made some pretty nice finds.
That's true.
And that's what's that's the part we want to focus on.
All right. This is the Speed Traveler Roadshow. We'll be right back.
All right. Well, welcome back to the Speed Traveler Cars and Coffee here on KHTS Radio, available on your favorite podcast platforms. And Charlie, we love getting out on the road, and Mercedes has a wonderful array of different models to go cruising. Not only from like off-roading, on-roading, just cruising, touring, but also racing. And we've got some great routes that we could point out and talk to people about, taking their cars out and fun stuff to do with a Mercedes.
For sure. If you have a Mercedes, you can join the Mercedes-Benz Club of America, and that's at mbca.org. And you can get involved that way. And it's really cool because last week feature mark was Ferrari. And that's like a different experience. That's more of a hobnobbing type experience.
Right.
The Mercedes one is really like down to earth and grassroots. So they've got Concours d'Elegance events. They've got driving events. They've got track days. Some really cool stuff, And for instance, we were, and Kelly, you did a track day. It wasn't a Mercedes event, but you recently did a track time event at Laguna Seca. And tell us a little bit about how that experience was.
Oh, that was a fun experience. We love Laguna Seca. It's a great track. It's a really fun experience if you have a fast car and if you have a slow car. I mean, I was in a 530 and it was a hybrid 530, so it wasn't the speediest of the cars.
Right.
Which was,
you had a
and
low
it was
center
still
of gravity,
fun.
though.
Yeah, it was still super fun, though, and I loved it, and I recommend it for anybody. Even it doesn't have to be a Mercedes driver. It can be anybody.
Well, there's tons of cars out on track with you. And, I wanted to ask you about that. When you're out on track, Laguna Seca is a daunting track. It's not a flat track. It's up and down. There's walls. I've hit a couple of them, unfortunately.
There's the corkscrew.
The corkscrew, which is just iconic. It's like aim for a tree and turn.
Yeah.
And but Kelly, I was really impressed because there was a lot of cars out on track, and I want to ask you, it's two-parter. What was it like with all those other cars and varying driving levels and skill sets out on track? And two, what was it like learning that track? Because you initially were very conservative, and I was watching the times. You got fast very, very quickly. I was really impressed. So, what was that like? Yeah, with all those other cars and then just learning the track.
Oh, I loved it. I would so go back in 2 seconds to Laguna Seca. I liked it better than Buttonwillow. I liked the challenge. I don't know. I like turns for some reason. I think it's fun. I like to control the car. I don't know. It was an amazing experience. It does suck with the other people, but that's just how you have to learn how to drive with those other people. And I think it helps because when you have someone all over like the back of you, you're like, okay, maybe I have to speed up. And so it kind of encourages you to get faster, to keep up with the other people. But I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, and that's we're talking about Mercedes. That's our featured mark this week. That wasn't a Mercedes track day, but there's lots of Mercedes track days.
Well, they have events around the country at all the tracks. They do tons of cars and coffee events.
Yeah.
Well, cars and coffee. I should say Concours d'Elegance type events.
Right.
And there's just it doesn't matter what car you get into. We're talking about Mercedes this weekend. But it's just get in that car and go out and drive and have those experiences, whether it's just driving a local canyon road. Like we're really lucky here in Southern California. We've got Mulholland, which is just tons of fun to just drive and just cruise. I've got great stories of my parents going convertibling, going to track days at Laguna Seca.
It's unbelievable,
it's just
right?
unbelievable.
Sonoma, You could go, if you're in Texas, you can go to the Houston Motorsports Ranch. If you could go to Coda, which is in Austin, Texas. I know they do a lot of Mercedes programs there. Sebring, if you're down in the Florida area. If you're up north a little bit, Road America.
And I should mention, Sonoma now has a new Mercedes Experience Center right on the track. There used to be, I think, was their virtual racing installation, is now Mercedes's performance driving experience. So I think that was a brilliant move on their part to associate themselves with what I think is just an incredibly fun track to drive. And the facility they have there right at the end of the pit road, or at the end of the is just right there at turn 1 at pit exit. It's just a great facility. So Mercedes is really pushing, a lot of fun programs.
Performance driving,
fun driving.
And it goes along with they're spending more money than anyone in Formula One.
Right.
So, it makes some sense that they want to get a return on investment on their Formula One program and racing.
Right.
And Formula One's so popular now, it just makes a lot of business sense for them to push performance driving.
Right. How are we doing on time, pal?
We're good. We're going to take a little break here in a minute, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk cars, our picks for cars. If you haven't listened to the Speed Traveler Roadshow before, we definitely talk about up and coming classic cars. We always talk about the depreciation curve. I feel like a broken record, but I think it's important for people to figure that out, is that when you first buy a car, it could be whatever, $80,000 if we're talking about a performance car. And then, within 5 years, it's going to go down to 60, 55,000. In 10 years, it may go down.
And that's that buying curve you're talking about.
It may go down to 40,000 in 10 years. But then at some point, it starts to bounce back up. And that's when you want to find, if you're out there to find a fun car and a car that you could actually make some money on, you want to find a car that's hit bottom of the depreciation cycle, and now it's on the way back up. So we're going to talk about that more when we come back.
Yeah. And Mercedes actually has a number of cars in that category. So I'm really excited to talk about that.
Yeah, they do for sure. But you are listening to the Speed Traveler Roadshow on KHTS Radio, AM 1220 in the Newhall area. Also on all of the podcast platforms. As of this week, you can catch us anywhere. Also, you can find us on the Speed Traveler YouTube page. And you can see all the back episodes there if you're really inspired. So we will take a break and be right back.
All right. Well, welcome back to the Speed Traveler Roadshow Cars and Coffee Edition. Charlie, we're going to get into one of our favorite segments. Well, they're all kind of my favorite segments. I love all of them equally. I love all my children.
They're all special in their own way.
But we're going to kind of get into the car buying market, and particularly with Mercedes. And honestly, it's interesting to me. I'm going to start this off with, it's interesting to me that Mercedes is one of those brands that really kind of holds on to their value. Mm-hmm. They don't see this big swings in appreciation and depreciation.
Right.
Now, when they start appreciating, they go crazy. I mean, we could talk about like a 1961, what was it, 67, 190. That's a $7 million car, but but that's its own thing. But it's interesting, looking at the Mercedes used car market. There's a number of different models that I'm kind of looking at. And it's interestingly enough to me, a part of it is a lot of that, we mentioned this before, is the 80s models. There seems to be a lot of 80s models that I think are kind of in that sweet spot right now.
Yeah, and we've bought and sold a number of 80s cars. I think it's only been one or two Mercedes. We've done it with Ralph, from Hollywood Show Cars. And we've definitely, we did really well on the Mercedes car that we bought. But, we've definitely taken our lumps with other cars before. So we like to share those experiences with people. If you're listening, if you're listening on the YouTube channel, or you're listening live, you're probably coming if you're listening live, you're probably coming from a Cars and Coffee event.
Right.
So we like to share that experience because we want to encourage people to go out there and drive and have fun. And there's nothing leaves a worse taste in your mouth is when you get stung badly on buying a car, spending lots of money fixing it, and then selling it for half of what you bought it for.
Right. Before we move on, I'd like to ask all our listeners, we're talking about Mercedes, so I'd like to keep this Mercedes-centric. If you have a Mercedes in your garage, in your quiver, we would love to see a picture of your car, how you acquired it, what you've done to it, and what the experience has been like driving that car. And again, if we post that, we put that live on our Instagram feed, we'd love to send you a Speed Traveler t-shirt just for your efforts. And so yeah, send us a message on The Speed Traveler on Instagram with a photo and a story about your car, and we'd love to share your stories as well.
Yeah, and you could also hit us up on YouTube at the Speed Traveler channel. You can just send us a note and we'll DM you and figure it out. But yeah, we've got these great Speed Traveler t-shirts. We actually, over the weekend, were at the Alice Cooper concert.
That was so great.
And it was really fun because it's Halloween, almost Halloween time here. And we gave the band members some shirts. And the drummer, Glenn Sobel, absolutely went crazy for the shirt. So this is your opportunity.
And also Alice Cooper is a huge car guy.
Oh yeah, huge car guy. We've tried to get him on recently. He's on tour right now. He just did 22 shows in 30 days.
Yeah, they were just in LA, in Anaheim. And then that night after the show, they got on the tour bus and went to Phoenix, I think it is.
Went to Phoenix.
It's crazy.
It is pretty crazy. So we'll have him on. We're going to hold that episode to talk about Aston Martin because that's one of his favorite brands. But we'll see. At the end of his tour, hopefully we'll get him on. But back to buying a Mercedes, you brought up 80s, and we had the Mercedes 500 SEC. It was called the Benny S.
Yeah, the Pan Am edition.
Yeah, the Pan Am edition. And it was this wild 80s, like straight out of Miami Vice, giant fender flares. They only built
three of them.
Three of them, yeah. And the designer and builder's name was Bernd Schneider. It actually is not the Bernd Schneider race car driver.
I know. I mean, when I heard about that, I immediately go, Bernd Schneider, the touring car champion? I was like so excited. I was like, oh my God, this is so rad.
And we can give the car was purchased and we got to tell that story.
Yeah.
So we found, well, first of all, we found this car and it was just crazy. The radical fender flares. It had these giant 13-inch BBS wheels and the rims in the rear, the weave type ones. And it just looked like you would find a kilo of cocaine still strapped to the bottom.
I'm certain there still is a kilo of cocaine in one of the door panels. We never stripped it down far enough to actually find it. And it did end up at a new place in a new home, which is amazing place.
It is.
I'm kind of curious. We should almost ask him to kind of
go. The Patina collection. If you go on Instagram, you can see, pull up the Patina collection. And
it's all Mercedes all the time.
and literally 50 of them with a marble floor. And it's one of the most incredible collections ever. And you know what? It's a great idea. Let's have them on. We'll have them on soon. But the story behind it is we bought the car. We had it for a while. Chris did a show. If you want to see this particular car, and I really encourage people to check it out, go to the YouTube page, The Speed Traveler, and you can check out Chris's review of the 1983 500 SEC. But we bought this car. We did some videos with it. We used it in a couple movies. And we put a picture on our Instagram page. And if you recall, Chris, I got a DM from some guy. And he was like, hey, call me. I want to buy your car.
I want the car. We're like, no, whatever. Yeah, because that happens all the time. I want it. But
exactly. And you need to be careful of that. For those of you that are inexperienced, there's all sorts of scammers that want to buy your car.
But he was not. I mean, he was legit. I mean, you did a lot of research. You started kind of, okay, wait, this guy's for real.
Yeah. I had him send me a copy of his license. And then I looked him up. He was in the Florida area. And everything panned out. I even called someone that he had bought a car from just to double check. And they're like, yeah, this guy's legit. So he ended up, he was so excited about the brand and so excited about it. I think he was born in 1983. And that's why there was significance for him, because this was in 83. And we went out of our way to fix the car and make it really nice for him. And we didn't have to do that. But we always say in the Speed Traveler, when you're buying and selling, what goes around comes around. And so we went out of our way to make sure all the dings were taken out of the seats. And we had the wheels fixed for him because there was a crack in a wheel.
Went through everything.
Yeah, we did. And now, if you want to see the car, check out the Patina collection. But
still, it brings up a good point, though. Buyer beware, be cognizant. You know what you're getting into. Do your research. If you're a DIY kind of person, make sure you have enough experience in the model of car that you're looking at to be able to do it yourself. Because if not, specialty mechanics can get rather pricey. But
Agreed.
we did a lot of that, and the guy, he actually ended up doing some more stuff to it, really cleaning it up, polishing. I
did?
mean, he really did a nice job on polishing up that paint job.
He sure did.
And
yeah.
now it's on display
Yeah.
in his amazing collection.
Yeah.
What's his
It's the Patina,
collection? Yeah.
the Patina collection. So you could check it out there. But on that car, it's probably too late for that one because he, as you said, he's fixed it up. We sold it to him, I think, for about $45,000.
Mhm.
It's probably up to 80 now,
Right.
Which is good on him. But
Yeah.
if you're looking for something similar, the SEC models were 1981 to 1991, so they had a 10-year run. The code name is C126, and the C means coupe.
Right.
And they developed the chassis from the W126, which was the four-door edition.
Which is funny because, the first number you're talking about, like the W121, that's the German engineering mark for that model. So
exactly.
you got to be mindful that there's a German version,
Right.
Model number
Right.
and version number, and then there's what they end up stamping on it for the American, what I'll call the American market.
For sure. So that code name, we looked this morning on Hemmings. By the way, Hemmings is a great way to find. You can narrow down what you're looking for on Hemmings. So we use it all the time. And it's a great way to narrow down what you're looking for. You can see what the market is really quickly. It's a lot of times it's dealers, it's not private individuals, but we saw them this morning from about $25,000.
But Hemmings is a great, you mentioned Hemmings, and I want to speak about them in just a moment. They are such a great resource because they do give you, you just touched on it, but they give you so much information about the model and that year in general. How many of these are selling? What are they selling for? What's the highest, they do a lot of stuff, that really is important to the buying aspect.
And a lot of times
of it.
there's articles about there's articles about the cars.
Right.
So that's the cool thing about, we found a few this morning. We found 3 and they were all about 25 grand. They all had about 100,000 miles. Then we're talking about the 560 SEC.
Right.
That's getting up there in mileage. You got to be really careful with that. But what a cool car.
But again, it goes back to what we talked about in the previous segment, and it's an analog type car.
Yeah.
So it's from a mechanic standpoint, you can do a lot.
Right.
Wiring is a lot simpler. And it's, just everything mechanically. It doesn't have all the computer stuff in the cars after 2007. I think 2007 is kind of that line for me where everything went a lot more electronic.
You're right.
So
no, I agree. Earlier cars are great. That's why we're really high on the 80s cars, and
particularly from Mercedes.
Absolutely, and it brings us to our next car, and that is the 190 edition.
Yeah, the 190E is probably one of my all-time favorite, know-nothing sedans. Obviously, it's got a huge reputation in Europe from the German Touring Car Championship.
Yeah.
It was an absolute monster. It was going up against the BMW of that era to go do battle.
Yeah.
And it's just a silly, unintrusive, unexciting 4-door sedan.
Yeah.
But boy, is it a fun car to drive if you find the right one.
Exactly.
That's
a good point. And I think specifically we're talking about 84 to 88 was the Cosworth.
The Cosworth edition,
with a manual.
Yes.
That, if you could afford, it's not outrageous. We looked this morning, there again, I think we looked on Hemmings. We found quite a few in the average 25 grand range. Not bad.
But this funny thing is with the 190E, there's a couple other generations. It went out from I think it's 1983 to 83 to 93. It's about a 10-year run.
Yeah.
And they have in the 190E, they had the 2.3. Well, they had a number. They had a 1.8. It was very short lived. They got rid of that motor very, very quickly because it was just so underpowered. But they had the 2.3, which was a 4-cylinder engine, and which was a lion's share of the build in the builds that they had. And they built about a 1.9 million 190Es in the various formats. But if you can find the 2.6 liter, which is the 6-cylinder engine, which is also available with either the 4-speed, actually, no, it was a 5-speed transmission, 5-speed transmission.
That's the one to
and
get.
that's really the one to get. The 2.3 is a lot more readily available, but in comparison to the Cosworth, like the 2.6, you can find that in that $10,000-$12,000 range.
Yeah.
It's going to have some mileage on it. It's going to need a little bit of work done to it.
But Mercedes guys love that generation car with the manual.
Right.
So, you could find one for 10 grand. And
Absolutely.
it's a great car.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But, we like we said, we saw a few this morning with the Cosworth 2.3, and those were $25K. So that's something to look at. And then, of course, there was the Evolution 1 and 2
Yeah.
that came. Those were homologation cars. And what that means is Mercedes had to build a certain amount of them to be homologated into the series.
Into racing.
It had to be like a real number of road cars before they could qualify to be in that sports car series.
What's funny is, and a couple other brands took a huge advantage of this. Mercedes actually sold those cars, but the homologation wasn't based on selling the car. It was just on manufacturing, producing the car.
Yeah.
But they actually sold those cars.
They
like
did.
a couple other brands, like I believe it was Lancia.
Yeah.
You know, they just built enough cars.
Oh, yeah.
That they
Qualify
never
for the
sold
World Rally
because they were
Championship,
just so dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if anyone's, I mean, I'm getting a little off track here, but if anyone's ever looked at that Lancia Stratos,
Oh my God, it's a crazy
it's
car.
a crazy car.
If you can find one now, the prices are insane.
Yeah, $1 million.
Back to the Evo 1
yeah.
and 2. So the late 80s, Mercedes was really getting into DTM racing. So they built these crazy homologation cars, the Evo 1 and Evo 2. We looked here again. I think we looked on Hemmings this morning, and we saw an 89 Evo 1 that was $300,000. We saw a couple Evo 2s. Those were 90, 91, and they were in the $200,000 range. I think the average price on those was $269,000.
Wow.
So unfortunately, that day's kind of come and gone if you're looking for the Evo. But before we get too far off the subject, we just want to make an honorable mention. You were talking about the 190. And in 1956 to 64, they made the 190 SL. And those are about between 100, 200K. They come with a manual, which we love. As you mentioned,
it only came with a
manual. There's some super rare ones, like you mentioned, the one with the doors and all that. I think it's $7 million. But you can find a regular 190 SL for 100 to 200, which isn't bad. But, brings us to our last car, Chris, and that is one thing we both like. It's a little over your 2007 threshold of going all electronic.
Electronic, yeah.
But it's the 2009 Mercedes AMG SL63.
Right.
It's a 6.3 liter motor.
It's a monster of a motor.
Yeah,
it's a monster.
518 horsepower.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's an absolute beast. And you know what? It's crazy because the car looks like a beast.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, it looks like just it wants to chew the road up. So, to the driving dynamic, it really falls into the window. It just looks like something incredibly fun to drive. And they're not really that expensive.
No, they're not. We found a few this morning. 41,000 for one with 29,000 miles.
A 20-year-old car with under 30,000 miles
unbelievable.
For under 40K.
Yeah,
I mean that's
30. We found one 33,000 with 53. It's got a few more miles, but those are we talked about the depreciation cycle. Those are already hit their bottom, and now they're on their way back up.
They're gonna start creeping up.
If you're in the market and you like that car and body style, it's not a bad car to own it. They're expensive cars. You have to know what you're doing, and you have to find a good independent mechanic.
You need a good,
You can't take it to the Mercedes dealer.
No, they don't know how to work on them anymore.
And they're going to charge you a
fortune. Yeah, you really, that's a really good point, that independent Mercedes specialist. And there is a certification program that they have to go to get that moniker. So if they say it on their front door that they're certified Mercedes, and there's an acronym for it, and I forgot what it is. But do the research. If you go to one of those mechanics, do the research and make sure they actually have that Mercedes-Benz certification, because it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. All right. Once again, we covered the 500 SEC, which is the 81 to 91. We covered the 190E, which you like, just a regular manual in the 190 you can find for 10 grand. We covered the Cosworth version. That was that's 84 to 88.
How are we doing on time? Do we have time to do a little nod to the G-Wagon?
Sure. Yeah.
Because it's not something that anyone really talks about too much. Everyone, the G-Wagon, it's a pimp mobile, currently, or what have you. And I actually think it's a rad vehicle. It's got a long history. So, I mean, the G-Wagon really came out, I think, again in the 80s, when it became available to the consumer as an off-road vehicle.
And it was used in military.
But it started,
exactly.
That's where it started. It was actually built in a lot of them under the Puch name in Austria. So you see a lot of like military applications that became available in the consumer version of a G-Wagon,
Yeah.
which is really the predecessor to the Hummer, if you
Yeah,
will,
it
in
really
a
is.
sense.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
so it's military spec.
Yep.
So the G-Wagons are a lot of fun. You can find some older ones out there in pretty good nick because they really honestly didn't get any real off-road use. They're
Right,
kind of,
right. Yeah.
fun cars to have. They also made that crazy six-wheeler.
Right.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But whatever. I mean, that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
We go ridiculous. But the G-Wagon is definitely worth looking at.
I agree.
Anything from the 80s. They took a little break in the early 90s, I think it was. And
Yeah, and they're hard. They're not super easy to find because they weren't sold domestically in the U.S., but they've had so many imported now,
right.
that you could find them relatively affordably.
Hey, but you bring in, so we've talked about this previously with other cars that we've imported from other countries, and that's a car, shipping prices have actually gone through the roof, but a couple years ago, shipping one of those cars that you find in Europe or in other countries is a great way to go. I mean, honestly, we've seen a lot of stuff come our way in the from the southern European countries,
right?
Making their way here because people were in situations where they had to sell them, or Americans were maybe spending too much money on it, and they're making their good points.
Right.
But it was still a value for us to buy it here.
Yeah.
So.
But that wraps up our buyer's guide for today. We are going to come back and talk some F1. This is the Speed Traveler Roadshow on KHTS Radio.
All right. Well, welcome back to the Speed Traveler Cars and Coffee Roadshow, or is it the Roadshow Cars and Coffee Edition? Available listening to us live on AM 1220 KHTS Radio and available on all your favorite podcast platforms. Of course, you can check us out on the YouTube channel, The Speed Traveler. And Charlie, we're moving into kind of some racing news and some road news.
Yeah. Before we get to F1 news, we're going to talk a little bit about a fun trip that we took. If you're in the Palm Springs area, it seems like any snowbird in the world comes to Palm Springs, Palm Desert during November to March.
Right.
So you could be from Minnesota, you could be from Canada. It's just amazing when you go and like hang out at a hotel in Palm Desert. And people are from all over the world. Basically, anywhere there's a cold climate, people are there.
People can come to Palm Springs.
But we found a great road. It's the Palms to Pines Scenic Byway. And it is, it was made famous. If you're old enough to remember, It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World. It was a great, great movie about a chase where they were trying to find treasure. It's where they filmed the original scenes where the car went flying off the track. It was a highway then known as Highway 74.
74.
Still known as Highway 74, but now it's taken on the nickname the Palms to Pines Scenic Byway.
And it's an amazing road. And actually, another person famously did it on motorcycles, Michael Schumacher.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
It's a route that he specifically had his motorcycles, and he and his buddies out, while those off season. He may have been retired in his first.
I think
retirement.
It was in between. Yeah, his first retirement. That's exactly
and he came out and he did a lot of. We should actually, that'd make an interesting episode. We should go back and see all of the road tours that Michael Schumacher has done.
Motorcycle,
on his motorcycles and cars, and this was one of them.
Yeah, and he loved coming to America because at the time it was pre F1 rage, which everyone's all about F1 now, but 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it was different.
Yeah, only you and I would be screaming, Michael Schumacher!
Yeah, so he loved coming to the States and doing his motorcycle trips because very few people recognize him.
Yeah.
Right now, I can't even, if Max Verstappen came here, he'd be mobbed like a rock star.
Right.
But back in the day, Michael Schumacher could come here and do his trips and people wouldn't bug him.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And that's a great road. It's a one-day route.
Yeah,
it's not a long,
miles
it's just 67 miles each way. And it's worth doing the out and back because you could just go straight through and cut into Hemet and what have you, but
take the freeway
back or something, or just make it a point to point. But this is one of those roads where it's equally interesting and unique in each direction.
I agree.
So you see different stuff. The turns, the same turn in one direction is completely different the other direction. So it's a really, really fun road to drive.
It really is. So try it. The Palms to Pines Highway. It starts in Palm Desert, Highway 74. Out and back, and there's places to hike along the way. There's all sorts of great scenic views. It's not a whole lot of services, so make sure you're filled up and ready to go. But yeah, that's it. One of the great trips we took. But let's move on to F1 now. Last weekend's Japanese Grand Prix.
Grand Prix. It was That was an exciting race. I was very hopeful that Ferrari and McLaren could continue the fight with Red Bull, but once again, Max Verstappen in that Red Bull was just 100% dominant.
Yeah, he was. He was in a class of his own. I don't even think he really pushed the car that hard.
We didn't even see him on the TV for most of the race. But the race with Mercedes, with Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, with Ferrari, with Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, and then the McLarens with Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, that was a really interesting battle in that middle pack.
Yeah, it was really good. At the very start, Perez got together with Hamilton. And Perez ultimately had to retire the car. Hamilton was able to move on, and since Mercedes is the featured marque today, we should talk a little Mercedes, but they just didn't have the same outcome that they had the week before.
They didn't.
They were on it the week before. They were the fastest cars at the end of the race. This weekend, they just didn't have it.
They didn't have it. And interestingly enough, I was watching the race, there was I would call it in the third sector of the race, the third period of the race, if you will. George Russell went on a different tire strategy than Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton kind of followed suit with what everyone else is doing. George Russell was trying to go long. And then there was a situation where Carlos Sainz was chasing them down. And I really felt like Mercedes was going to do the same thing that Carlos Sainz did with Lando Norris in the previous race to kind of keep the competition from getting past them using the DRS, even though they were on opposing teams.
Yeah.
Here's a situation where Lewis Hamilton and George Russell could have done that exact same thing. And they really didn't. I mean, Lewis Hamilton kind of pushed to, hey, I'm the senior driver here, let me through.
Yeah.
And it really sacrificed George Russell at the end.
It wasn't great teamwork. But talk about great teamwork. What about McLaren?
Wow.
Because they had the same situation where Lando Norris caught Piastri.
Yes.
And he blocked him for one lap, but then they got on the radio and they were like, okay, man.
Okay, boys.
Let Lando go. And it worked to perfection.
Yeah. And that was the right thing to do. We should have seen maybe a little bit more of that with Ferrari at Monza when when Leclerc was challenging Sainz, really, really hard. And it's like, take out. We've seen it before. Right. We've seen it before where teams are not just demanding from their drivers team orders.
Right.
You can always say, okay, yeah, you'll get repaid in the future. Do this for the team now. This is good for everybody. Right. And quite frankly, from the team's perspective, it's the team championship that is by far more important than the drivers' championship.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Formula One, they divide up the money based on your championship points for the team. Everyone talks about the drivers' championship, but the money comes from the team championship.
Right.
So it's critically important to have both cars finish at the front. You can't have guys battling each other and taking each other out inside a team.
Inside the team, especially even in situations like, I'll go back to 2016 when Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg were battling like crazy. And in they almost did 3 times, but in 2 races, they took each other out.
Yep.
Now, granted, they had the most dominant car.
Right.
The Mercedes was an absolute genius car back then, but they couldn't control the drivers enough to not make that mistake.
Yeah.
But coming up in Formula One, the next race in 2 weeks' time, I believe is October 8th, is going to be Qatar. Yeah. And then after that, for all of these North American fans, they come to the U.S. and Mexico and Brazil.
Yeah, U.S., Mexico, Brazil, and then back to the U.S.
Yes.
So pretty exciting. We've got, as you said, what's the next race on
Qatar?
Is Qatar.
Qatar in October 8th.
And then they're going to come here for COTA, which is in Austin. Then they're going to go down to Mexico
City, and then they're in Brazil at Sao Paulo. And then they come back for Las Vegas Grand Prix.
We are going to do a live broadcast from that event. So hopefully if you're at the race, you can come say hi to us, or who knows, maybe we'll even have you on the radio.
That would be great.
But thanks again, guys, for listening. This is the Speed Traveler Roadshow. We will be back with you next week, and enjoy your Saturday.